Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Eggleston, and I run Course Report, which is a resource for students who are choosing a coding bootcamp. If you haven't looked at Course Report yet, you know my spiel. I do this in every one of our videos. You can use our directory to find schools that fit your learning style. You can check out our blog for interviews with students and instructors like this one, and founders at bootcamps across the world. Plus, we've got application tips, virtual classroom tours, all of the things that you need to choose the best bootcamp for you. So if you've been researching coding bootcamps, or you're just researching the path to getting into tech, you've definitely come across jQuery, which is a JavaScript framework that's used for interactivity in websites. And so if you just heard that sentence and thought, what's a JavaScript framework? Or like, didn't I read that jQuery is quote unquote dying? If you thought any of those things, then this is the video for you, because we've got Zachary Lynch, who is an instructor from Sabio, which is a coding bootcamp in California. Hi, Zachary.
Hey, everyone.
So Zach is here to talk us through jQuery. We're going to talk about what jQuery is, who uses it, and why you should still learn jQuery at a bootcamp, and 3 things that you would learn about jQuery at a bootcamp like Sabio. So let's hop in. Zach, thanks so much for being here. I have a bunch of questions for you about jQuery specifically, but I want to start by asking about your role at Sabio. What do you do as an instructor, and how do you work with students?
Sure. So my role at Sabio is I'm an instructor and I teach specifically JavaScript and jQuery, HTML, and CSS. Now, this is for students who literally have never touched code in their entire life before. Like myself, when I started coding, I had no idea what to do until I was with Sabio. And now I get to teach students a foundational level of JavaScript and jQuery as they continue to try to be professional developers.
And so how did you get into tech, Zach? It sounds like you might have gone through Sabio yourself.
Yes, correct. So I was in the Army for 8 years. When I got out, I thought, hey, what am I going to do now? Went to a few things, did my research, found out what Sabio was, and thought, you know what, that's it for me. I really had an interest in code and had no idea how to start coding or what it took to start coding until I came across Sabio, and then they taught me how to become a professional developer. And now I've made the full circle, and I'm teaching people how I was taught to.
That's amazing. Really cool to have that experience as a beginner and a learner in a boot camp as well. So you can kind of help the next generation of developers. Did you work in tech after you graduated from Sabio, or did you go straight into instructing?
No, I worked so after I graduated Sabio, I actually landed my first job at a mortgage marketing firm as their software engineer, and built an entire CRM application. That's a customer relationship management application for them, actually utilizing jQuery too. So it was actually very beneficial that we learned jQuery in Sabio to start out, because then I go there and I'm now utilizing jQuery for up to almost a million clientele. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so you use jQuery in your job. So let's hop into the main question. So what is jQuery? We mentioned that it was a JavaScript framework or a library, but tell us what jQuery is for a developer.
Sure. So jQuery is a JavaScript library. And what it is it allows developers to use code snippets or condensed code to basically do traversal on the page, event handlers, like what users do when they click buttons and when they want to go places, or make changes to certain elements on the page utilizing JavaScript. Basically, it gives us a bunch of different tools and methods we utilize that allow us to, make these changes without having to write, pages and pages of code. jQuery has provided that library for us to allow us to do these things in a condensed manner.
And is that essentially what a JavaScript library or framework is?
Exactly.
Like, is jQuery a pretty classic JavaScript library?
jQuery is absolutely a classic JavaScript library. So by definition, it's just a collection of pre-written code and snippets that we can use to perform reusable code throughout our applications.
Could you give us maybe an example of like functionality that a developer may use jQuery to add to a website or an app? Like, what could someone do in the real world?
Absolutely. So the most basic example of these things is that if you have a button on the page and you click that button, you want that button to do something. Like, say you're building an application to store all of your clients, and you want to click on a client's profile. jQuery will allow you to click save that contact, and you're expecting that save button to do something and send that data to the database. Well, jQuery provides you tools and methods to basically simplify that, from either filling out the entire form for the contact and all the necessary data to updating that contact's record and basically just making it a clean and reusable component. That way you can utilize it for each contact you have, and it'll make what we call event handling very, very simple.
Okay, so event handling, interactivity, the button, that's a great example and like very relatable. Everyone's clicked a button on a website. Okay, cool. So if somebody enrolls at a boot camp, they're probably going to learn some jQuery. Could you tell us maybe like 2 or 3 things that you might learn about jQuery or times that you would use jQuery at a boot camp like Sabio where you teach?
Absolutely. So things we'll learn at a bootcamp utilizing jQuery would be updating HTML and CSS on the page. So when you want to make a component look different after a certain action, jQuery has a ton of methods that allow you to do this. You will also be able to utilize methods to insert new data into what we call arrays and variables and objects, and utilize those variables to make changes to the page as well. Another huge one is working with jQuery's AJAX calls, which allow you to do API calls from your database to your front-end application. This is where we get our data from. So those are some basic fundamentals and foundations that you'll learn at a bootcamp, especially at Sabio, that allow you to have a really good grasp of what you'll learn utilizing jQuery, and those things transfer over to more complex front-end libraries such as React or Angular, things like that.
Okay, so if someone Googles jQuery, I feel like one of the first Google search results that comes up is like jQuery is dying or jQuery is dead. Don't use jQuery anymore. So like, why is that the first Google search result? Like, why is that the case? And what is replacing jQuery right now?
Okay, so is jQuery dying? Is jQuery dead? Very, very good questions. jQuery is not dead. It might be being outphased by other front-end libraries such as React or Angular, or even smaller libraries. There's hundreds of them out there that get produced every single day. However, when you're utilizing jQuery, a lot of small businesses that are first starting up still utilize jQuery, or small to medium-sized businesses before you get to the corporate level of coding. Because it allows you to just get an application up and running very quickly with a minimal amount of code. Say, for instance, you just wanted to run a simple Shopify website. Well, Shopify even runs on jQuery for the most part, jQuery API development. So jQuery is being outsourced by a few languages, but I would say for the most part, there's still a massive utilization of jQuery in the workforce. And for instance, like I said, when we first started this, my first job as a professional developer, building an entire CRM application, was utilizing the jQuery framework.
So you mentioned, obviously, if somebody graduates from a boot camp and starts in their first job, even if there are alternatives to jQuery, I guess, you're probably still going to be learning or working with jQuery because of legacy code. Is that the main reason that Sabio chooses to teach jQuery in the curriculum, or are there other reasons that y'all really like
Absolutely,
prefer to teach
both those
students?
things. So if you end up at a small business with legacy code, more than likely you're going to end up utilizing jQuery. So understanding, hey, I know jQuery now, I know the foundations of jQuery. jQuery has a very, very small learning curve that allows people to pick up on jQuery very easily, which is why we start out using jQuery at Sabio. And B, it helps you really understand the foundational level of what JavaScript is doing on the page. How do I update a specific element? How do I put data from a user onto a card on the page? How do I make a button fire? These are the reasons why we use jQuery, to get those foundational level aspects cemented in a student's learning.
And okay, so it's a foundational aspect. So what point do students, at what point in the curriculum does a student learn jQuery? Is that a basic skill or basic tool that students would learn really early on, or is this like an advanced library? When does it come into play?
So having been a student who had never coded before, and for the students that I teach now, jQuery is actually you can get to jQuery within the first week of your training with Sabio. Like I said, that learning curve is very, 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 very simple. So understanding jQuery does not take too much time. Understanding the foundations of jQuery doesn't take too much time. So some students end up on jQuery within 2-3 days of starting at Sabio. Some it takes about a week to a week and a half, but it's actually very, very simple to get to before we get on to the more advanced and complex frameworks.
And do you remember when you were interviewing for your first job after Sabio, like, were you asked something about jQuery in the technical interview, or is that something that you should expect as a bootcamp grad?
Absolutely. So we start out learning jQuery, and then we go on to these complex languages. And then I get a phone call saying, "Hey, we have a position. Would you like to interview for it? It's a jQuery position." I take, just a day or two to relearn and refresh myself with jQuery. I'm back at it. So technical questions, can you loop through this data and show me what data comes out? So we have jQuery methods that we use, like for loops. Basically, those are some of the main things you'll be asked to do. Can you update this page with data with jQuery? Very, very simple things to be done that can be done, and things that realistically you can learn within a day if you really wanted to.
I feel like for loops are like something classic that you get asked in a technical
Absolutely.
interview. And so
Yeah.
that's jQuery.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
So
then
the
sounds
foundational level of training and coding comes from jQuery and JavaScript. So knowing those two things will put you ahead because they translate to other languages very, very easily.
Well, Zach, I think this was a perfect overview. Really appreciate you going through all of this with us. Is there anything that you think would be helpful to a future boot camper or to a new programmer to think about when they're thinking about jQuery? Anything that we missed in these questions?
Oh, so you're going to be tempted to look at all these amazing languages and platforms out there, and they're all worth knowing. jQuery will be the one I would recommend most for getting a baseline understanding of how to use JavaScript and how to update an HTML page. And then start coding now, because there's no stop to it. So just get on it right now.
Amazing. Well, Zach, thank you so much for joining us and giving us so much great insight into jQuery. I think I've learned that there are many JavaScript libraries that you can use to do the same thing. And while there are a lot of options, jQuery is still a super solid framework and library, and probably something you're going to be asked about in a technical interview. So sounds like it's worth learning to me. So totally makes sense that Savio teaches it in the curriculum, and we appreciate you for explaining it all to us.
Absolutely, of course.
Cool. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Let us know in the comments if you have questions about jQuery or about what you might learn in the Sabio curriculum. And let us know what technology you'd like to see us dive into on the next Course Report YouTube video. We'll see you next time.